So we're really excited to be with this awesome group of panelists. And just for our reference, I'd love to know in the room, who here is a founder that has not yet made a sales hire but is thinking about that? Okay, so quite a few of you. Who maybe is a founder who has made a sales hire, a VP of sales, head of sales, at your company now or maybe at a past company? Okay. And of those who maybe have made a mistake in doing so over the time, yeah. Okay. I think that's something that we all can sympathize with, and that's why we're here tonight to talk. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we'll get kicked off to the good stuff. So next to me is Matt Ingemi. Matt is the director of sales at Uplevel Security. Previously, Matt was doing a regional sales manager at Resilient Systems, which was acquired by IBM, and in his 12 years of experience, he's gone through 3 company acquisitions. So really great perspective for us today. Thank you for being here, Matt. Julie Maresca, she's the head of enterprise sales east at Slack. I'm sure that's a tool that many of you use. I use it. Previously, Julie was head of sales at Dashlane and regional sales manager for enterprise at LinkedIn. And she brings over 10 years of experience, and her specialty is hiring and inspiring. So we're going to get some of that good stuff out of her tonight. Last but not least, we have Morgan Mackles. He's the VP of sales at x.ai, previously VP of sales at iron.io, and he served as an advisor for Heavy Bit Industries, advising a lot of startups on their go-to-market strategy. And if you haven't checked out his videos yet on Heavy Bit, do that tonight. They're awesome. You won't regret it. And last but not least, I would love to do something that we do in true Workbench fashion, and that's kick it off with an icebreaker so we can get to know who's up here. So if you would, and you can start, Morgan, tell us something about yourself that's not on your LinkedIn profile.
Okay, not on my LinkedIn profile, so that means
something good.
Non-professional. So something not on my LinkedIn profile. In San Francisco, where I just came from, I was in a cover band, and
Woo.
we won in 2017. We won the Battle of the Tech Bands. So there's something non-work related.
Something not on my LinkedIn profile. I have 3.5-year-old twin boys at home, so when I'm not working for Slack, I'm full-time being a mom, and I guess I'm living proof that you can function and live off of little to no sleep for 3 consecutive years.
Yes.
This is tough. So I am a diehard New England Patriots fan. So I will answer any questions tonight, but not taking any questions around the Super Bowl.
Sorry, Matt. Okay, so to kick it off, I think I'm going to ask a question that we get all of the time. I feel like this is the golden question. When I am ready to make my first sales hire, who am I hiring? Is it a VP of sales? What's their background? How much am I paying them? Where should I be at in my company to do that? And I know, Matt, you just came on board to Uplevel Security. I'd love to hear what the process was in that, why you think they were at the right stage to hire you, and how you're thinking about growing the enterprise sales team there.
Yeah, that's great. So Uplevel is still in an early stage. It's around 10 employees right now. They have some customers in there, and we're doing a lot of great things in terms of cybersecurity and getting in front of the right people. I met the co-founder about 4 months ago and started the initial process. As Allie mentioned, I worked for 3 startups. I've gone through acquisitions. My latest one was IBM Security, which was unbelievable, but it was a huge organization from a security perspective, from a sales side. So I was running enterprise sales there for a little bit, but really looking forward to finding the right technology at the right time. And a lot of the stuff that Uplevel really needed was, understanding really how to drive not just top of funnel, but how to keep sales moving, right? Where you're getting in front of the right people, you're having great conversations, but you're getting stuck in certain areas around whether it's a proof of concept or, specific ways to actually, bring revenue in. And sort of that's kind of what my experience has been for helping drive initial customers, but also then figure out strategically what's the best way to start, whether it's hiring sales development reps or enterprise reps. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about that as we move forward. But that's kind of what drove there. And for them, it was really a strategic person with just some experience working with startups, but also how to handle an enterprise sale.
Would love for you to weigh in, Julie and Morgan, on what those characteristics are.
Sure. Yeah, I think if you don't exactly have your product market fit yet, you really want maybe more of that IC role that can be experimenting and testing with ultimately what your customers want and how to reach them. So if I was looking for someone more in that role first, one, I'd be trying to hire ahead, so someone that you know can grow into a bigger role, that this isn't just what they've done their whole career, because the reality is they're going to have to wear many hats in your organization. But we have a 7-point scorecard at Slack, and I would say more than any particular characteristic is that there's rigor around that process. But other things we look for is being coachable. You're going to be learning and failing a lot on this, in this role. Having that grit and really having passion, because this first job, it's really hard to be that first person and go through all those learnings.
Yep. I'll add, if the subject is for the people in the room that haven't yet hired your first salesperson, then the answer is not very satisfactory, really, which is it depends. But there is kind of a sweet spot, and for me, it all has to do with looking at the overall goal. And the overall goal of having a sales organization is to drive scalable and repeatable sales. So if that's the goal and you work your way backwards, the time to hire someone who has the kind of level of experience we're talking about is not too early and not too late. So what that means is the materials, the raw materials for scalability and repeatability need to be there, and what you need is the person to come in and provide disproportionate leverage at just the right time. And it's kind of like the old adage, like your VP sales or whatever, like we can't make your product good, but if you have something there, something going on, then we can use our skills to really leverage that and speed up the process. And the ballpark is that between 1 and 2 million in ARR, if you're a SaaS business, is usually where things start to get interesting. And then from there's a million variations, but that's a high-level idea.
And Julie, you touched on that 7-point scorecard, and I know here in New York City at Slack, you've taken the enterprise sales team from just 2 people to much larger. You were sharing with me before the panel. So what exactly is that scorecard? When are you using it? What does a kick-ass sales leader or candidate look like?
Yeah, we use it throughout the whole process. And again, I go very much back to the process first. It's very easy to really like someone just by a conversation, and I think you really have to be disciplined with the questions that you're asking and the consistency in the way you do it. So our hiring process is 3 to 4 steps long. Typical phone screen, in person, but there's always a panel there so that multiple people we're getting multiple perspectives on the person, and a presentation. And so I think, and we ask the same questions every single time, so that if you're deviating from that, your decision can get emotional.
Is there a key question there, like one that takes the cake?
One that we ask that tends to throw people off a little bit is if we asked your hiring manager to highlight areas where you really shine, what would they say about you? And then conversely, if we ask them what your areas of coaching and development are, what would they say? And so a lot of times that forces them to be self-reflective. It can give us a sense of how self-aware they are. And we'll dig into those a little bit more to see how uncomfortable potentially they are, or how they've actually reflected and learned and developed themselves.
That's a great one. And on the flip side of that, I'd love to hear, in hires that you've made, has there been any red flags and people you've brought onto the team? Any one of the panelists can jump in here. How do you spot that red flag? When do you know? And how do you react or respond to that so you can continue growing your organization?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So from my perspective, I've had a lot of experience managing inside salespeople. And you're right, you can go through some of the best process asking the same questions, and still when people come in, you really don't know who you're going to get until they start working.
Yep.
The easiest thing to kind of track and kind of understand what's going on with inside salespeople are kind of doing the minimum, right? Where, especially for a startup, when I come in and there's people that are there before me, that says a lot about their commitment, willing to learn. But you have certain candidates will come in at 8:30, do the exact minimum amount of calls, and that stuff's hard. And I guess areas are you really can't reprimand them for showing up on time and doing the minimum, but the areas you can really coach is promoting within and showing other people that have made additional calls, have stayed late, who have asked questions, to get promoted around them as a way to kind of that you can kind of help and kind of encourage that type of behavior.
And when and how do you know when to let someone go so you can save yourself from that?
I think when obviously performance starts slacking a little bit, when if you're doing the minimum and you're not getting the results, then that kind of changes the conversation a little bit.
Awesome. So many of the folks in the room you saw here are really early stage in building their enterprise tech startups. They might not have made that first hire. What are some most common characteristics you see founders get wrong when they're building and scaling their enterprise sales teams?
So I've seen a million things that founders do wrong. But so for me, I'm a very big advocate of kind of mitigating the potential risk. So when I think about candidates, whether I'm advising startup CEOs or whether I'm thinking about my own candidates, I think about it in two planes, which is qualitative and quantitative. And I think about, for me, my experience is that the best indicator of future success is past success. So if you think about that on a quantitative basis, that's pretty simple. How were the results? What were the numbers? How did you do? Where did you start and where did you end? How were the outcomes? How many reps did you start with then? And how many did you finish up with? So those are quantitative. And then qualitative, I'm a huge network fan. And I will do reference checks and I will ruthlessly cross-reference and kind of backdoor reference. Yeah. Talk to my VCs, talk to former employees, anybody that knows that person, and then that gives me a really good feel for the truth of their past performance. Again, both numbers and then interpersonal relationships, because you have to have both of those components in a startup. So in a startup, my opinion is we'd move too fast to have a really good salesperson that isn't a cultural fit, which is different than when I was in Fortune 500, where sometimes your best field reps, you never see them. You have to have the quant and the qual, and I think that goes for the people that you hire to be in our chair, but also the people that we bring on going forward.
Julie, I'd love to hear your experience too, working at such a large organization.
Yeah, as large as Slack is now, I would say it's still very much in startup mode, and I think you touched on a point that where I see people trip up, and when we realize we have to cut the cord is around this pace. So, if you're not really testing for people that have worked multiple projects at once, people that have kind of done things outside of their current role, and ways and understanding how quickly they can pick up your product and pitch, like we do sort of role play type of interviewing. They're not going to be able to keep up with how fast things are moving and how much they have to do in addition to the role that's really tasked for them. So you have to make sure that you test for somebody that really wants it, but if I can see that somebody is not picking things up right away, our onboarding goes through a lot of certification, so it's more compassionate to get them someplace that's better suited for them, because it'll be like this for the foreseeable future.
And can we just double click on the onboarding process piece? Is there a specific process or format that maybe each one of you has carried through at each company you've been at that you think is key to making a hire successful and getting them trained on your company?
Yeah, so I think you brought up a good point too. I think you wear a lot of hats in sales, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially when you're kind of new to the career. So something that I always do is have a new hire meet with every key member, whether it's marketing, whether it's someone in engineering, just so they understand what these people are doing on a day-to-day and really how much work goes into actually building the product that they're selling, right? Where, these engineers are sometimes the most passionate people, the quietest people sometimes, but the biggest thing for them is when the product gets sold, and, they're kind of the unsung heroes. So when you get a new hire and actually have them meet with every key member, I think it's really helps them understand really there's more than just making money. It's really helping every person from every department in the organization.
Yeah, I'll just add, for all of our onboarding, every new hire class, our CEO has a session. And so I think the executive setting the vision and the mission is really, really powerful. We're a mission-driven company. And again, I think it kind of sets, it takes you big picture and gets you prepared for when times are tough to like really hear directly from the leaders why we're all here.
Yep, I know you want to hear from all of us. So that's the key, right? The key is have a structure, right? In the first place, don't just ad-lib it no matter how early in the process, like the hiring process you are. If it's a first hire, second hire, don't take anything for granted because that person's starting fresh. So have a process, think about your process. And then for me, I totally agree, involve your team. And at a high level, like, yeah, quick 30-minute, like, here's our company and here's what we do. But also involve your like direct sales team, and then for me, like that means marketing, sales, and product success, product all kind of together. So involve those people that they're going to be touching on a day-to-day basis in the actual training and onboarding.
And on the topic of process, Morgan, I know you are so process oriented. It's never too early to start. We've seen quite a few of the docs that you've used at your various roles. How do you ensure that your whole team stays process oriented? Is it that you're using the same time during one-on-ones to talk about it, walk through the customer pipeline? Like, how are you creating process and making sure your team members are held to that?
Yeah, good question. I am process driven. I'm crazy. I have a few of my reps out in the audience, and they'll tell you I'm crazy about process because when it's good and you iterate on it, you can scale a lot faster. And what do we do to make sure we're all united? So Google Drive, right, is awesome because you can iterate on it and everybody can see it and work on it at the same time. So I actually have documents for like our different meetings. And they change over time. So you're talking about different ways to like engage your team. So we have one-on-ones. We have a team meeting as the sales team. I have an executive meeting, and basically I have an agenda that ties into our databases of record like Salesforce. Yep. And so what that means is that every meeting is the same. I mean, unless we change the process, and we're going over it in the same way, just using Salesforce or 15.5 or whatever we're using to have a collaborative discussion, and just repeat it over and over and over, rinse and repeat.
Anyone else want to weigh in on a process that's really worked for you and that you've been able to keep your team accountable with?
Yeah, just I'm very similar with that with my team in terms of having kind of a team meeting every week. I actually do pipeline review, not individually, but with the entire team. That way, 10 ears is better than one. So people might have heard something from a customer that, hey, this is actually something that we've seen before, and you're actually having other people give input. And then in terms of kind of one-on-one meetings, I would have team members actually send like weekly goals, like what you're looking to do for that week. And then on Monday, when you have the one-on-one meetings, that's when you really go through and figure out really what you're going to do this week to achieve kind of these goals and have those areas. So very similar to that, and kind of sticking with that process and moving forward.
And before we open it up for audience Q&A, I know a lot of you have burning questions. Each of you, please go down the line. Tell us one tactical piece of advice that everyone in the room can take here, implement in their process. What would be your one piece of advice?
I love kind of, it's silly, but I love kind of morning stand-ups from a sales team where it's sales reps kind of hate it sometimes, but it's really a good way to understand what's going on with the day. Also, transparency in a startup kind of can get lost quickly. And when you have big wins, whether it's in marketing or whatever, it's a good way to kind of talk to the entire company at once of what's going on. It doesn't have to be daily, but implementing that once a week, I think, is a good strategy to get everyone on the same page.
Julie, what would be yours?
Those are good ones. I mean, I would say I go back to process. You don't want your team coming in winging it. So as much as you can start to look at sales enablement tools, the tech stack, how you're going to arm your team, I think that's easy, it's controllable, and it's setting them up for success.
I'll give you a hiring-related one that I think is really powerful. I kind of borrowed this from my marketing partners over the years, the concept of an ICP. So everybody knows, right? Like that's your ideal customer profile, so the person you want to sell to. So with hiring, what I actually do when I'm trying to go out and hire a role is I create an ICP for the role, and I call it the ideal candidate profile. And what is important about that is that you're actually laying out exactly what it is that you're looking for, the level of detail that you would expect from one of your reps when going after an account. And what I find, not only is it helpful to for you to think about the actual role, but because I do so much of my recruiting through networking, it allows you to articulate to other people. Like if I want to say, John, I'm looking for a sales engineer, you can break down, here are the exact traits that the perfect person is going to have. Here's the comp range that they can expect. Now he has that in his mind, and he's able to articulate your value proposition to the right profile of person. So, hire-related one.
Awesome. Let's give a quick, huge round of applause to our amazing panelists for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing your gold nuggets with us. I'd love to see who in the audience has a question. You back there?
What would you guys say is the best way for the product function within your organizations to work with you guys so they can identify from you the ideas that are going to help unlock, let's say, 20, 30, 40 deals going forward, as opposed to one deal that one salesperson is working on at that given moment?
Yep. I'll go first because I have a very short answer. This is the first time at x.ai I've ever had a real product team. I'm used to very early stage startups. And our best practice is that our enterprise workstream has our own PM, Lainey, and she basically lives with us. She's in calls. She's in our team meetings. She is everywhere. And so she can tell you about what the pulse of is going on with the customers as well as our sales team can. So that's the depth of my knowledge right there.
Yeah, in addition to that, we have product managers that are pretty closely aligned with us as well. But just getting them in front of the customers as much as you can, having focus groups, getting scaled events where they can hear what customers are asking. A lot of times it's that building the trust. And when they hear it from the customer, not just the salesperson, it's not just about closing that deal, but they're starting to understand, where we potentially need customization.
Yes, same thing. It's very similar with customer success as well. Having someone in there understanding the needs and relaying it back and having that open dialogue of what's going on, what are we hearing from our customers. Oftentimes, it kind of goes unnoticed where people go on a sales meeting or on site and they don't really report back. So I think at an early stage, it really is taking those notes, understanding what the customers are, what you're hearing, and figure out kind of how to build that roadmap of what you're hearing across the board.
So you had a question way over there.
I would be curious in terms of investors, what do you expect from them? How do they best help you? What is the right stage for that?
The question was, how do your investors best help you, and what do you expect from them?
So as being the sales leaders, one of the super useful things that good investors do is introduce you to awesome potential customers in a very warm and kind of wink handshake manner, in that the people here Bank of America and all these awesome companies trust Workbench, who's one of our investors, and therefore they're open to meeting with early stage startups like us because we're vetted by that mutual contact. So I would say that being the salesperson, that's kind of the most useful thing that they bring to you. Besides all the money.
We had one over here.
Quick question, more on the startup side. I get that you hire for cultural fit, but when you're selling to the enterprise and you're in the earlier stage, how do you know it's not working out? Because the sales cycles are long. You do cultural fit, but you haven't got metrics around what a sales cycle looks like. So how do you know when it's not kind of working? Obviously the founder's magical, so they don't count as the...
Great question.
Yeah, so I think early on that is hard, right? And I think that a lot of it goes on to kind of our roles here, right? Understanding that there's a sales process. So there's a culture fit. I look for more of a culture add as well, but in terms of what you're saying is there's a process you should follow in sales, and I think if you develop that, I think it doesn't always necessarily fall back on the salesperson. It could be strategy that that we're missing. If I'm hearing the correctly.
It's just like, how do you know it's not working out? Like, you've dated them for a long time, they're working out, the culture fit, they're adding to the team, they haven't made a sale, but it's okay, it's enterprise. It takes a year to make a sale in the enterprise. A year too long? Like, I know each business is different, but at some point you got to say, it's not working.
You might be able to take that. Yeah.
I mean, I would just say you need data up front about without data, like how many sales under your belt, or even having some small wins. It's really hard to judge if it's product based, if it's market fit based, if you're not in sync with your marketing team in terms of lead gen. So I think there's a lot of different factors you have to look at, and you probably have to check those boxes that you've done some rigorous tweaking or at least assessment in those different areas before you go to the person. But I think also sometimes, whether it's right or wrong, sometimes it's a gut. You can tell how they are in front of customers. You can tell if they get your product, if they can sell your vision, and if they don't have that DNA, ultimately it probably won't work out.
Yeah, and getting really specific, if you hired a straight up enterprise salesperson and your product has a 9 month to 1 year sales cycle, and you haven't sold one or two yourself as a founder or whatever, then you hired too early. You shouldn't have even hired that person.
I think we have time for one more.
Following up on the previous question, I spend a lot of time on questions. It ranges anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on the product. Plus, I don't like to use the term product, I like to use the term solutions. Because a lot of which your business, a lot of what the customer buys is a solution. And to me, it's very hard to tell whether if someone you hire is a good fit, depending on your sales cycle. If you're selling something that's really a very pointed sale, it could be 6 months, it could be 2 years. So the question I have for you, and I've seen this many times, when you hire, the first question I have is, you've lost a deal to a competitor. What do you do with respect to that when it comes to process? What's your follow-up process? And the second thing is, how do you really engage enterprise marketing in helping you sell? Do you expect them to do lead generation? Or do you expect them to be with you at all your meetings, at certain qualified meetings? How do you really engage them?
I'll kind of tackle the marketing. Yeah, so I think going from your question, just in terms of an enterprise sales process is long. Sometimes it can go from 6 months to a year to even 2 years. And then in terms of kind of marketing and what you depend on them, from whether it's lead generation, being in front of the customers, understanding. So I think from an early stage on, I'll kind of handle the marketing. I have more experience with that. It's more not lead generation. It's putting the right information out there to make to really talk about what the product is and make the company seem relevant to the market. So I think just in terms of that, there's certain blog posts that you look for your marketing team to put out, getting you in front of the right audience in terms of whether it's magazine articles or just news stuff, just to get the name out there. So it's really not we're looking for 100 leads a month. It's really just getting the publicity at an early stage.
John, do you have a question?
I'm going to use my executive privilege to ask one final question.
Yes, one final question from John. We'll allow it.
I saw on Twitter, Julie, this for you, that Stuart was at SaaStr yesterday, and he said, the nut we haven't cracked yet is explaining what Slack is. And obviously you guys have had crazy growth, you've been amazingly successful, but as you guys make a bigger push into the Fortune 1000, how does that message impact how you hire and how you message to new recruits on the sales team, given what you guys are doing is new for large corporations?
The fact that we haven't actually cracked the code yet, how does that impact hiring? Is that what you're asking?
Like he's saying, defining what we do,
Yeah.
and being very succinct about it.
Yeah, it is really hard. We're still working on it. I think one of the benefits that we have is that there's a lot of awareness about Slack, and people love using Slack. So we have end user love that not many B2B software tools can say that they have. So there is I would say a consumer type element to the tool. So a lot of the people that we talk to have used Slack already, and so they have this they have this connection to it. But I think where we go with it is that it's really exciting and it's aspirational. It's like, where can we take this thing? We've cracked the code on we've done something which is like change the way people communicate, right, in businesses, and done it in a way that people, other companies maybe haven't been able to do in the past. And now we've got this second layer where we're going to bring in all your tools that you use in this one platform, make it really easy, and then we're going to add all this cool AI to make it just work for you, right? And so it sounds kind of maybe hokey, but I think if you give the big picture of what it could be and you're going to help us define that, a lot of people think that that's fun.
Okay, final. I promise.
So I know no sales reps ever sandbag their quotas, but on the chance that some of them do, what do you do to help prevent that? How do you identify that and then avoid it, address it, make sure it doesn't happen?
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, that's a great question. So I've never done that in my career either. So, but I think, having the metrics and having a sales force, right? So it is having visibility into what's going on with your account. So I think at the certain stage of a company where you actually have kind of managers in there, it's kind of their responsibility. What I look for as managers is to track what's going on in each account and understand, what the timeline is. And again, with enterprise sales, I mean, it is a long process and it is kind of hard to kind of sandbag and push off because you're always looking for that last day of the month or the last, especially in kind of enterprise sales, it's always usually December 30th, so those budgets close. So it's kind of hard to push it back, but, just relying on your management and your sales force to kind of understand the timelines of the deal and what's going on with the accounts.
We're pretty diligent about having 5 points always filled out in Salesforce at all times, and if they're not, it's just expected. You've got to have Salesforce hygiene, and next steps is one of them. And so if that's, so they can't really sandbag if they're filling that out, and we know exactly what's happening next.
Yep, I agree with everything they're saying about having the right people in the right process, but I guess one thing I'll say that is different that you haven't heard yet. So I was a sales manager at Fortune 500, or at least sales management level, and then now I've been a manager at 1, 2, 3, or 4 startups, and it's very much dependent on the people. If you hire the right people at the startup level, it's just not going to be a problem, right? And at a corporate level, they're always worried about how do you tweak the comp plan and how do you make sure no one's gaming the system, and it's impossible to keep track of everybody, and that's totally true. But at a startup, if you're getting sandbagged, Jessica, you hired the wrong people.
With that being said, I hope all of you are better equipped to run and scale your enterprise sales organizations. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Morgan.